What's happening, Tasuo Warriors? Today we're going to take a look at a deck profile for the Omnibrawlers. This is a deck built using essentially all Season 1 cards, so it's something anyone could build. And this is just a version that's seen some play and some testing, and thought I'd share it and see what you guys think. Out of the gate, we'll start with the Warriors included in this deck. We've got 4 copies of April. She's a 6-life warrior. When this warrior is called, add an Omni card from your deck to your hand. That's not incredibly important yet. There are not any Omni cards that she can fetch, but they are coming eventually. I'm sure they'll be awesome. But if this warrior sends a warrior to the dead zone, it can't attack until the end of the turn. Essentially, these guys use their attacks on their cards instead of having to have attack cards in the deck, which means that they have a lot of hand advantage and they don't have to deal with some of the same resource costs and things that the other decks do. Therefore, if they keep chaining their attacks without having to have any cards in hand to do it, it'll be really strong. So if they kill one of your opponent's warriors, they're just done with their attack. But her other ability, though, is twice per turn. This warrior can attack a warrior for 1.5 damage. It's a physical punch, chainable attack. So like I said, she can chain that 1.5 attack over and over until it misses, and then can do it a second time. But if at any point she kills an opponent, she can't attack for the rest of the turn. Not a bad thing, especially for a 6-life warrior. She's easy, low-cost investment, and 2 attacks out of a single warrior is always good. We've got 3 copies of Lenai here. He does say 9 life here, but he has recently been changed to 7. But he has an effect that if this warrior is sent from the field to the dead zone, by a clash of course, emergency call it to an open zone with half of its life. So it has 7, comes into play with 3.5 after it dies. You can only use that effect once per copy of the card, so you can't bring them back at like 1.75 and etc, etc. It's just the one time. But he does have an ability as well. Once per turn, this warrior can attack a warrior for 2 damage. It's a chainable punch again. This one does have a fire element to it though. This is obviously a great warrior too. Being able to recall it is good. It means you always have the potential to have an extra warrior on the board. The important thing to consider with this warrior though is if it dies when it comes back and it's 7 or at 3.5 life, it's still a 7-life card. So it's still going to count as a 7-life warrior dying for your body count and clash gauge purposes. So be careful there, don't rely too much on that, but it's nice to know that you're not immediately out your warrior if you lose him. That's why we only run him at 3. Then we've got 4 copies of the star himself, Tai. He has 7 and his life has recently been changed to 9. He has an effect here once per turn when this warrior is sent to the dead zone by a clash or effect. It's not sent to the dead zone instead. That effect has recently been reworded to essentially say the first time that an attack, the first time each turn that an attack would kill this character, he is put to 1 life instead of killed. So he's just real resilient, sticks on the board really well. Once per turn, this warrior can attack a warrior for 2.5 damage. It's a no element physical attack, punch, chainable attack as well. And has a second ability that while this character has 5, or in this case with the recent change 7, or more life, once per turn you can change this warrior's element to steel until the end of the phase. That gives him +1 damage, so it essentially means that he can hit for 3.5 when he attacks. Especially if you can get to chain that, that's 7 life off of a single character's attack. If you just hit 2 times, that's enough to kill a ton of the characters in the game. So we run him at 4. He is absolutely the star of the show here. Now, I have one more warrior in the deck here. It's Nominoru. He is, I did say that everything's from Season 1. This guy is actually a Season 2 card. But he's a 6.5 life. Effect can only have 1 on the field. Once per duel, when this warrior is called, draw as many cards as energy as you have on your side of the field. Focusing on that, very nice. Also ability, once per turn, this warrior can receive 3.5 damage if the attack does elemental damage. So essentially the first 3.5 worth of damage that elemental attacks do to him just does nothing once per turn. And then when you play him, you just draw cards equal to how much you've charged. So a lot of times I'll just draw one of these, hold it for a while, use it to draw 3 or 4 cards later in the game, and definitely just pays for itself. That being said, as a Season 2 card, the average purchaser won't have this. So there is a slightly different option you could run, and that is, of course, just running the 4th Eleni, and just running 4 of each of the 3 Omnibrawlers. Wouldn't be a bad choice. Obviously a great card, but I just like the card draw economy of this guy. He's a fun little feature from Season 2, and obviously fits in really, really well. Next, we'll get into just the attacks included in the deck. There are very few in here, since all the characters do have their own attacks, but we've got 4 copies of the Lotus Lily Somersault Kick. This card is a card that I think is staple in just about every single deck. I can't imagine myself not wanting to run 4 of this. Essentially, it's an effect attack warrior your opponent controls for 2 damage. This attack can only be chained with attack with spin in the title, so you can't keep chaining this unless you have a spin attack, but during your clash phase, if this card is in your dead zone, you can send it to the outer zone 2 to target and attack your opponent for 3 damage. So you play it once for 2 damage, goes to your discard pile, and you can send it from your discard pile to your outer zone to attack for 3. So it's essentially 8 attacks right here, instead of just 4. It's hand advantage because you don't have to have this card in your hand to perform the attack, and that's just really, really good. I love this card. It is an attack that Nominura can use because he doesn't have his own printed attack. It's also a kick, which is really important too, for attacking with all of the Omnibrawlers, since they punch, and a punch and a kick together will stun your opponent. They can't continue to defend against your attacks. So having a punch and a kick go off, and having the access to the kicks as well is really, really powerful. Then we've got 3 copies of Lotus Lily Backflip Kick. Target warrior your opponent controls for 2.5 damage and launch the target. This card is chained to a somersault card. This card is considered spin, to have spin in the name. So it can spin to, or it can chain to Lotus Lily Somersault, which is one of the reasons we run it. But it also does launch the opponent. And launching your opponent does additional things based on how far you can get their launch to go. Extra damage, prevents them from doing effects of their own. So it's just a really strong kick as well. And having some attacks that aren't just the attacks printed on the warriors is nice too. A little versatility. Having these 2 as non-element attacks means that say your opponent is running cards like Nominura themselves, where he absorbs elemental damage, or in like the Lotus Warriors deck, for example, the Torch character won't let your Lotus characters be attacked by abilities, so this will let you still have something to do in that regard. So it just means that you're never completely out of options. Getting into the defense cards in the deck, I've got 2 copies of Jacket On, Jacket Off. This is a fantastic card. In fact, you have to pay a clash gauge to use this, but when a warrior you control is attacked with a physical attack that does 2 or less damage, Kyushu, or catch the attack, and then that warrior can't evade during your next attack. You can't use this as the warrior that has a weapon, but it doesn't bother me at all in this deck where I don't run any weapons. But essentially you pay 1 clash gauge, which you will almost guarantee that you have, just by going first even. But as long as you've killed a guy or something like that, or anything, there's a lot of things that will get you clash gauge, so this is very handy there. If an attack does 2 or less damage, you just catch it, stops the attack, and then they can't evade during your next attack, and you just get to set up a huge combo against them on the reverse. I run this at 2. You could run it at more. The main developer of the game, he does think that this is a 4 of card. I don't necessarily disagree, though I don't like the fact that it has a clash gauge cost. I don't like ever having something in my hand I can't use at a certain time. I like to build a deck knowing that everything I have in it is usable all the time. So I limit this to 2 myself, because there are some times where you don't have a clash gauge to spend to play this. 2 copies of Graceful Parry effect. You have to pay a clash gauge for this one as well. When a warrior you control is targeted or attacked with an area attack, parry it, which is essentially just evade it. You don't take damage from the attack. If used in response to an effect or ability, the warrior can't evade or parry your next attack. So just like Jacket On, Jacket Off, you can use this to set up a pretty striking chain against your opponent. Just like with that one as well, you could run more copies of this. I like it at 2 because of the clash gauge cost. When you do get it to go off, it is very powerful. 2 copies of Ninja Roll. When a warrior you control is attacked with a physical or area attack, parry it. Just a great block. I only personally own 2 of this. I would definitely see this being an easy 4 of. It's just a great block. Especially because it hits area attacks. That's really important. And as the seasons go on, area attacks will become more relevant, and this will as well. Got 2 copies of Swiftback Handspring. Again, another card designed to, when your warrior is attacked, is targeted or attacked with an area attack, evade it. It's pretty much the exact. It's an identical card to Ninja Roll. Parry and evade do the same thing. There are just certain cards that say you can't evade the attack, where a parry will solve that problem for you. 4 copies here of Quick Back Handspring. When a warrior you control is attacked with a physical or area attack, evade it. These are a little more common to see. You're not being targeted, and it still stops area attacks, which is nice. If the warrior is equipped with a weapon, send the weapon to the dead zone. I don't use weapons, so it doesn't bother me at all. Like this card a lot. Finally, we've got 4 copies of Quick Back Handspring. This one here is when a warrior you control is targeted or attacked with a physical attack, evade it. So this one handles the effects that specifically target, as opposed to this one, which is more for the single attacks or area attacks that don't do any specific targeting. This one handles the opposite of that. So he just covers all your bases defensively there. A nice thing about the Omnibrawlers is you do get to run a lot of these defensive cards because your deck doesn't need to have attacks and things included in them. So it's very hard to get Omnibrawlers off the board. And lastly, we've got, well, not lastly, but for the last of our defense, we've got our 5 counters. In this deck, we run 1 Punch, Grab, Slam. When a warrior your opponent controls attacks or targets a warrior you control with a punch, Kyushu, catch the attack, and then target the attacking warrior, it receives 3 damage. Obviously, just blocking the attack and then your opponent's warrior just receives 3 damage is really strong, especially on a block. But I run 1 of it because it's situational. Again, like I said before, I don't like cards that I don't have full access to all the time. Not every attack is a punch, so this one is a little underwhelming for me as far as that's concerned. But there is an alternative to this. There's Kick, Catch, Slam that does the same thing but for kicks, and there are less kicks in this Season 1 format than there are punches, so I main a punch. That's up to you depending on what your local meta would be, but Punch, Grab, Slam works really well for me. And then my main counter, and what I think is the best counter in Season 1, is just Calibrated Counter. You can only have 5 counters in a deck because any counter just ends your opponent's turn. With this one, when a warrior your opponent controls attacks or targets a warrior you control with a physical attack, parry the attack. Stop an attack from any attack or any targeted attack. It's just fantastic. Phenomenal card. I can't imagine a situation where you don't run like 3 of this in a deck, if not 4. As more counters come out as the seasons go on, there might be a reason to run other ones, but I can't see this one being eclipsed for a long time. And lastly, we'll take a look at the responsive cards in the deck. These are kind of universal, I think, for most decks. We've got 3 copies of Double Backstep. I've got a fancy promo version here with slightly different art, featuring the art of a different soon-to-be-revealed character than the main version of the card here. But this one here, when a warrior you control is targeted with an area attack, effect, or ability, evade it. Obviously, great option there. Plus, it's a responsive card, so it goes in your legendary zones face down. They work like traps in Yu-Gi-Oh, so they're like a block that you can set up for later. So nice to have around for sure. I run 2 copies of Backstep. When a warrior you control is targeted with a grab, throw, or physical attack, evade it. This is great too. The balance of these is sort of up to you. The area attack is more what I'm concerned with. The games that I've been playing have been against like the K-Reapers, the Enchanters, things like that do a lot of area attacks, so this has been more relevant for me. But if you were playing against an opponent or a play group that didn't run those decks as often, I would suggest switching this to the version with 3 cards and this to 2. It's just kind of whichever version fits your meta a little better. These are kind of, they accomplish the same thing, but for slightly different versions of attacks. And finally, of course, 4 copies of Small Chaotic Storm. I can't really think of a time you don't run 4 of this. Maybe 3, but man. Target a face down or legendary item on the field and send it to the dead zone. Just back row hate is strong in any game that has a back row. In Baransu with their weapons, in Lotus with their Lotus flowers, with the enchanters with their tridents and their frags. Just being able to remove those in general is huge, but also being able to use this to pop your opponent's their own copies of responsive cards is huge as well. I absolutely think you need to have at least 3 of this, but I wouldn't recommend not running 4. That, though, is the end of my Omnibrawler deck. This deck has been doing great. It performs really well, and like I said, as far as other than Nominuru, who you can just replace with the 1 copy of Alenai that you get in the Omnibrawler pack anyway, the deck is completely Season 1 playable and handles the Season 1 meta fairly well. Stay tuned. We'll obviously have more of these to come, and thanks for hanging out. See you next time.